If you've been on any form of Taylor Swift-related social media recently, you may have seen speculation that Taylor is not, in fact, a straight woman. You may have seen this post on Cosmo, or this one on Pride, or perhaps this Glad post, or maybe even this Stonewall post. For years now, a debate has divided a small but opinionated subsection of the fandom. They're loosely divided into two groups: Gaylors, who believe Taylor is a member of the LGBTQ community, and Hetlors, who believe that Taylor is not only straight, but in fact so straight that the mere idea that some people analyze her work from a Sapphic perspective makes her desperately embarrassed. In part, what fuels both groups is the feeling that something big is at play. In fact, likely far bigger and more influential than any of us have realized or believe, because the balance has been tipped and is becoming increasingly clear. Taylor is here, she's queer, and we are living through her moment in queer history. For in reality, there is significantly more evidence across her song lyrics, who she spends her time with, the words she uses, her fashion choices, her stage show lighting, and the fact that a significant number of her personal and professional aesthetic choices are actual, direct, explicit references to the LGBTQ community that all support the notion that Taylor Swift is a Sapphic. Regardless of her identity, Taylor Swift is redefining how celebrities approach the closet and so much more. This video is targeted at those of us who aren't hyperfixated Saphics obsessively consuming Gaylor TikToks all day long, to try and get you filled in on the important notes, because if you have seen my last video, you know this is a good foundational knowledge for my 26-part Sapphic Switchy Saturday series, but more on that later. In this video, I'm going to get you up to speed on some background information you need to know, look at why this is so important and what it means, address a lot of common questions people have, such as why she hasn't come out before, and discuss where I personally see her going next. Why does it matter? A lot of arguments against discussing Taylor's orientation are rooted in the concept that being LGBTQ is just a matter of who you choose to sleep with, and therefore is inappropriate for public discussion. And while I agree that speculation does occasionally go too far, being LGBTQ is more than just a matter of who you love or who you want to sleep with. There is a whole community, history, and culture to participate in and enjoy. There is fashion, art, films, poetry, dance, book, and philosophies. And it's more than just one culture, because there are many subcultures within the community for each orientation and identity. Saphics in particular have often worked hard to rid ourselves of the internalized misogyny society has burdened us with. We see the full range of beauty, talent, and knowledge and potential of women. The way Saphics write about women is markedly different than the ways that men or straight women write about women. And beyond that, there are distinct themes in our art. Wanting to be more than just friends, fearing that we have a secret or are living a lie and that everyone would reject us if they knew the real us, inventing fantasy worlds where we can be free, forbidden love, secret lovers, and exploring concepts through the perspective of an avatar that's a different gender are just a few examples. Examples which have shown up frequently in Taylor's art, and with increasing frequency as she seemingly becomes more and more comfortable and empowered to share who she actually is. When you say someone's orientation doesn't matter, it cuts them off from their community and their community off from them. But also, more broadly, it is reducing queerness to the smallest possible element. If you think queer analysis is sick or perverted or insulting, I ask you to reflect on why you reduce queer people to just the bedroom elements. In addition, when someone is an artist and is telling their life story or perspectives in that art, and they have fans that analyze that artistic work for meaning, being unwilling to accept that the LGBTQ community can and will find and accept their own is also a harmful and reductionist way of seeing queer people. And in fact, Taylor's artistic works are made better when you accept Taylor as a Sapphic, because it means some of the songs we previously thought were works of fiction were actually about Taylor's own life, and that includes the Teenage Love Triangle trilogy. And you realize how much wordplay and perspective shifting and other things she's done to keep her orientation secret, and at the same time have her art be authentically about herself and her life. And as you see all of this, it's genuinely amazing how she's walked that line of having both things and how terrifying that must have been. We strongly suspect Taylor was more than friends with Carly, and Carly was managed by Scooter Braun and in a contract with him when the master sale happened. Taylor's life, story, and work all get more impressive if you accept that she's Sapphic. Her songs and their interpretations are deeper if you accept that many of her songs are about women and trying to conceal her love for them and how much of a double life she was able to lead. When you accept Taylor as Sapphic, you accept that she is needed to fight more battles than we previously realized, and that there is so much nuance hidden in her art that has significantly more meaning when analyzed through the Sapphic lens. But if you want to know more about that, and in particular want to see more in-depth analysis of Taylor's work from that Sapphic lens, I have a show, Sapphic 50 Saturday A to Z, where we're discussing one Taylor Swift song a week for 26 weeks, analyzing them through said Sapphic lens. In Taylor's album and tour visuals, she has probably hidden dozens, if not hundreds, of queer history Easter eggs, and in investigating them, I've learned so much. And I'm not the only one in the community. In investigating these Easter eggs, many of us have discussed the fact that we are learning things that we have never heard before, because it's not just obvious stuff. It's references to obscure publications, pioneers in the industry like Dusty Springfield, and important events in our history. She has also platformed so many LGBTQ creators recently, especially with the Eras Tour openers. In many ways, she is doing direct work for our community and should be accepted and appreciated as such. All too often, we don't get to analyze a Sapphic artist's work through a Sapphic lens until after they've died. Posthumously, Aching Letters to Lavender Lovers would appear, and then experts start to finally suggest that perhaps the women they spent their whole life living with may have been more than just her best friend and partner in sisterly affection. And then, finally, their art could be analyzed through the lens of other queer people, and undoubtedly, many of these creatives wanted their art to be seen through by others who would understand while they were alive too. Many of us, myself included, wish to be seen for who we are as we are. And this is the first time in the memory of my generation and younger that we've been able to watch as an artist of that scale and that level of success with that large of a body of work, with many levels of symbolism and history from the community baked in, is acknowledging their Sapphic identity. It's exciting. The major lesbian that I had growing up was Ellen, and she was basically instantly desexualized the moment she left the closet. She is and will be a huge role model within our community, but one that has been tainted by her recent scandals, and one who has inarguably done wrong by the industry. But more than that, Taylor is bigger than just a singer. Taylor has also been getting into film, and I personally believe she's a performance artist, because every time she goes out, her hair, her nails, her outfit are all being used to make artistic statements as Easter eggs. When she's in public, she's nearly always making a deliberate statement by which she's wearing. And I think she's just getting started, but we'll discuss my predictions for her future at the end. Taylor said it was okay. If you're not a hardcore Swiftie, I need to make some things about Easter eggs clear, because they're going to become a big deal around here. Taylor has told her friends to focus on two things, her lyrics and her Easter eggs, and she has further gone on to list the following locations as fair game for Easter eggs: song lyrics, music videos, outfits, haircuts, social media posts, and manicures. And we Swifties are obsessed with this because she has repeatedly and explicitly declared that these are the ways that she will intentionally send us secret messages that foreshadow things in her career and her life. This is not some weird speculative thing people started doing for no reason. This was an active invite. Taylor's expressed on many occasions that she finds a tremendous emotional reward and validation in realizing that other people have felt the same way she's felt before. During Eras Tour, she said she was addicted to writing a song, going on tour, showing it to her fans, and knowing by their reaction that they related to the feelings she was discussing in the songs. It makes it more real for her. It gives her validation. And she said that 2020 was very hard for her because she was writing a lot of songs and putting them out into the world and not getting that reaction. And that Eras Tour was her being relieved that she could get back to what she loved, realizing other people had felt the same way she had. However, Taylor has also explicitly told her fans multiple times that there are things about her life that she can't share, and that the media narrative isn't the truth, and that her song lyrics are what she wants people to judge her by. If Taylor is Sapphic, has been told by her label to suppress it, and has always wanted to be open with her fans, especially the ones who relate to her most, it makes a lot of sense given all of the other evidence we have. But also, it's genuinely heartbreaking to me that she has to live this double life for so long, and it makes all of her achievements that much greater because she hasn't been able to devote 100% of her focus to just her career. When Gaylors are looking at evidence to support Taylor's queerness, they're almost exclusively using evidence from lyrics and Easter eggs. If she were looking to covertly message her Sapphic fans, Easter eggs and song lyrics are exactly how she would do it. Something that will be a theme with me is, what's more plausible? Is it more plausible that Taylor is simultaneously putting all of these references into her music, but getting angry about people discussing the fact she might be Sapphic? Or is it more likely that the secret and the double life and best friend she loves more than a best friend references have actually been about her own Sapphic feelings, and she is desperate to be seen? If we look at the history of Hollywood and the music industry, we'll find Taylor is just the latest in a long line. We make your media. Hollywood, acting, and the music industry have always had a symbiotic relationship with queerness. The Hollywood life is attractive to people who don't desire a conventional nuclear family. And even if you don't start out with unconventional thoughts about family structure and relationships, once you have access to money and don't have to worry about base survival needs anymore, your thoughts on those things may change. From the very beginning, Hollywood has been heavily populated by people whose relationships and identities defied the norm. But the church pushed Hollywood to self-censor itself, and one thing it felt particularly deplorable was same-gender relationships. And as the media increasingly wrote of the private lives of these celebrities, lavender marriages and other strictly for PR relationships became increasingly common for public figures. Many would find that so long as they were seemingly in a conventional hetero relationship and posed with their quote-unquote spouse for media photo ops, they could get away with seeing whomever they wanted in their free time. Nowadays, we acknowledge that a considerable number of old Hollywood actresses, singers, and other famous women were associated with the Sewing Circle, a secret old Hollywood group which was comprised of Sapphic women. Hollywood is undoubtedly still populated by a considerable number of LGBTQ people, many of whom are still officially closeted. In this clip from the Rosie O'Donnell show, taken shortly before Ellen DeGeneres announced she was a lesbian, Rosie and Ellen make a thinly veiled joke about the quote-unquote Lebanese people in Hollywood.
We do find out that the character is Lebanese, and Lebanese. Yeah. And
just out of the blue, she just...
No, there have been clues. I mean,
really?
you've seen her eating baba ganoush if you've watched the show at all.
Right, baba ganoush.
And hummus, and big fan of Casey Kasem and Kathy and Jimmy's. Yeah, and
Hey, wait a minute. I'm a big fan of Casey Kasem. Listen.
You go, girl.
Maybe I'm Lebanese.
you could be Lebanese.
I could be Lebanese myself. I didn't know that.
You know, sometimes that's odd because I pick up sometimes that you might be Lebanese.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. You know, a lot of networks wouldn't take the risk.
Yeah.
You know, going
Right.
different ethnically with a character like that.
Half of Hollywood is Lebanese.
Really?
Yeah.
People don't know.
No, and
people don't know.
That's it. We have to change people's perception about Lebanese.
And you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think you are.
Yeah.
While there is obviously some element of hyperbole at play here, I do think they're only exaggerating a bit. I think there are far more Sapphics in Hollywood than we realize, and that only a fraction of the Sapphics in Hollywood are actually out of the closet. And if anything, I would expect that number to have increased since then rather than decreased. In addition, it's important to note that relationships among rich people tend to be different than the rest of our relationships, too. Showbiz Romances. For people who aren't rich, financial status often plays into why we get married. Often the goal of marriage is to find someone that we love, sure, but also we need to be able to make it financially. Rich celebrities seldom need to worry about making it financially, though they may marry for family legacy and estate management purposes. There is a surprisingly large amount of work that goes into maintaining and running properties, especially large ones, after all. And they do have another concern, too, that causes them to approach marriage and relationships differently. For there's an additional element to the Hollywood marriage: PR. Though Hollywood would prefer we pretend we don't acknowledge this fact, a significant number of showbiz relationships are made up for PR. Now, that's not to say that those relationships don't occasionally become real, and sometimes the lines are blurry, but rather to acknowledge that it's extremely common for PR to bring people together. This may be to bring attention to a song, film, or other project, to hide one's orientation, or to help shield them from bad press from their ex, or just to get their name in the headlines more regularly when they're in between work. Because of that, there's often a ton of young celebrities who are trying to get their name in the headlines who are willing to go along with the trappings of being in a fake relationship. Getting together for the occasional pap walk, attending red carpets together, being seen leaving one another's house, all of these are very commonly part of being in a PR relationship. And if you want a textbook example of PR relationship, look no further than Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, who I could do an entire video on. Entire NFL promotions have been put together for this so-called pairing, despite Taylor and Travis seemingly having known each other for merely 2 weeks. Travis changed the aesthetic of his podcast for a woman that he had met maybe 3 times. Were this a real relationship and not PR, it would be showing dangerous signs of love bombing. That said, though, pretending to be in love is often one of the best ways to actually fall in love, so I wouldn't necessarily discount a relationship for starting that way. It's just important to remember that just because 2 celebrities claim to be in a relationship, that doesn't mean they actually are, or that it's the only relationship they're in, which is another regard in which wealthy people's relationships often differ from poorer people's. If you're familiar with European aristocracy at all, you'd know that marriages were often more for business and finances than for love. The heart is fickle, the dollar is certain after all. Better to marry someone whose financial beliefs you're aligned with and who will raise children and protect the fortune in the way you'd want to. Then you are free to have as many romantic dalliances as you want, safe in the knowledge that even if your heart is broken, your piggy bank won't be. As new money aspires to be more like the generationally wealthy aristocrats, many of them take the lifestyle examples set by nobility of past and present. Celebrity wives turn a blind eye to their husbands' mistresses, tech CEOs swap hot wives with their peers, couples of all ages and backgrounds end up at elite swinging parties. Honestly, based on personal experience, I suspect that people of all income brackets are experimenting in extra-monogamous activities, and yet, paradoxically, even ethical non-monogamy and polyamory can get extremely bad raps. Even within the LGBTQ community, among relatively open-minded people, you'll find a lot of people who are strongly against anything other than strict monogamy. And as these beliefs are usually enforced in their minds by trauma from a partner manipulating them in the past, it can be difficult to open people's minds. All of this to say, while it's difficult for anyone to come forward and admit to being in multiple relationships at the same time, it is particularly difficult for PR-minded celebrities. This can add an additional difficulty to coming out of the closet. Often, your fans have gotten attached to one of your previous relationship partners, and if you are simultaneously dating one person to provide a smokescreen to hide another relationship in, your fans may suddenly turn on you because they perceive it as infidelity. And this is just one of many potential complications of coming out when you're famous. Why coming out is complicated. Let's discuss the subject of the closet and coming out of it, especially for anyone who may not have needed to be in the closet or come out of it before. In general, especially with younger folks, coming out is more reserved for the straight people in our lives. When LGBTQ people are trying to communicate their orientation to one another, it's often in the form of flagging, or just showing up to a gay bar or a lesbian bookstore wearing an outfit that has been selectively chosen to look gay as hell. Queer people are usually out to their queer peers for some time before officially coming out of the closet to the straight people in their lives. Also, we may need to come out again every single time we meet a new set of straight folks, so it's a bit of a misnomer to say someone comes out of the closet once. This allows people in the community to experience the community and be a part of the community without suffering the consequences from the straight people in their lives. Many LGBTQ people exist permanently in this state for an extended period. For example, most of my friends outside of work have known I was bi since my mid-20s, but I was closeted at most of my jobs. In celebrities, the best examples I can think of are Freddie Mercury in the era after he and Mary broke up. A lot of queer people, especially in their local community, knew him. He participated in drag, but the greater world didn't know he was bi until after he passed. Or Elton John in the mid-80s being so flamboyant that he was sure everyone realized he was gay. I think with men, it's a bit more obvious to people outside of the community since hypermasculine culture pushes men to reject anything feminine, whereas women are allowed to dress masculine without it meaning anything deeper. Flagging for Sapphic women, especially femme-presenting ones, is often harder for people outside the community to notice. And I believe that is one way Taylor has managed to exist in this position where she queer flags very regularly, yet until very recently, most straight people didn't really think there was a chance she could be Sapphic. And I think one element of the Travis Kelce thing that amuses me is the fact that Taylor has been acting more Sapphic than ever, but because she went to a couple of football games and put her arm around a man, people are convinced that means she's straight and with him and going to have his babies. Once people are programmed to see you in a specific way, it takes very little evidence for them to continue to see you that way. Despite Taylor acting more and more Sapphic since 2020, she holds hand with a boy every once in a while, and that allows her to continue to remain in this sort of in, sort of out status. That said, it does feel like she's working up to a more official acknowledgement, especially with Carly at LA Eras Tour, and with that whole week having a lot of songs that Gaylors have expected for a while were Carly coded. But coming out still has a very high cost associated with it, so I don't expect Taylor will do that until she has achieved all of the milestones in her music career that she wants to, and I think the biggest part of that is owning her masters. The cost of coming out. In the modern era, when there are numerous singers and actors who are out of the closet, I often see it asserted that there's no reason for a celebrity to be closeted or to skirt around the question of their orientation. But coming out almost always immediately limits their career potential of a celebrity. Actors may have a particularly difficult time getting hetero roles, and there aren't that many roles for LGBTQ actors right now. Singers may find their tour stop canceled, especially in more conservative areas. Sponsors cut ties, your work stops getting into PR it once got, and you're suddenly dogged by the militant followers of repressive religions. We know that Taylor Swift has been heavily inspired by Dusty Springfield, a famously bisexual singer whose career was almost permanently ended when she came out of the closet. She went from one of the most well-known voices of the time to virtually unknown. And while she did stage a comeback with her own album named Reputation, coincidentally her 13th album, she's not nearly as well-known as she should be today, and the backlash over her orientation is clearly one of the biggest reasons why. Ellen DeGeneres is one of the most successful and well-known lesbians, but she has really had to desexualize herself for the sake of her career, and she has undoubtedly missed out on many opportunities since she came out. And it's worth pointing out that Laura Dern wasn't even coming out of the closet. She was just on the Ellen sitcom for the episode where Ellen comes out of the closet and portrays the woman that Ellen is interested in. And she couldn't get a single opportunity for like a year and a half after that aired because of just being associated with lesbians. And I point out that Taylor's actually hung out with Laura Dern fairly recently, in fact. And that was before the militant Christian right became as aggressively brainwashed against LGBTQ people as they are today. Even in 2023, coming out is likely to result in a loss of fans, a loss of overall power and influence in the industry, an inability to visit or tour in some conservative countries and cities, or worse, the potential for violence to occur somewhere you're visiting. And when you regularly draw crowds of tens of thousands of people who will stand outside an event they can't get a ticket to just to experience the vibes of your presence, it is a terrifying thought to consider what just one bad person with bad intent could do. Taylor has indicated in previous interviews that she carries a wound packing kit with her everywhere she goes because there have been many stalkers on her property, and often when these stalkers are captured, they are found to be armed. And I will remind everybody that it is not just Taylor's life that is in danger if these people get violent. I also remind people that this seems like a particularly prudent protection for her to take, especially in the aftermath of what happened to Christina Grimmie. Stalkers can get very dangerous if they believe that the target of their affection is suddenly no longer interested. And obviously Taylor was never interested in any of them, but they didn't realize this. If she were to come out and say that she has a serious girlfriend, or if she was a lesbian or something along those lines, they may get very dangerous very quickly, and not only for just Taylor, to those who are around her, and at any given time that could be 70,000 innocent lives at risk. And the industry is still largely run by rich men who are often more likely to open their wallets and give an artist more support if that artist is a woman who they believe they could potentially one day sleep with. Even if these men aren't actively sleeping with you, when you remove yourself as an object solely for their approval, validation, and fetishization, they often lose interest in supporting you and your career. Coming out is also more likely to impact a celebrity's level of fame if they come from a more traditional or conservative background and have a good number of fans who are from similar backgrounds. No matter how chastely you portray yourself as a member of the LGBTQ community, there are always going to be a small but vocal group of quote-unquote family rights activists who suddenly think that your work is too sexual to be performed around children. Many LGBTQ performers have had to make their acts or personas much more chaste to dodge these allegations. And as a singer who already had to work her way through the troubling purity culture movement of the late 90s to be the face of slut-shamed female America in the aughties, and to only very recently be allowed to own her own sexual nature and embrace it, it is understandable why Taylor may not be in the biggest rush to exit the glass closet she's existed in for some time. In Taylor's case, we know a lot of her decisions are financially motivated, or at least they're designed with the well-being of her career in mind. Taylor isn't just one person supporting herself after all. Taylor has a full tour, a full team, several corporations under her name. Taylor's earnings likely support the career of hundreds of people, maybe even more. If her career ceases to be financially viable, or even if it loses a big chunk of its profitability, Taylor has to fire people, and those people lose their livelihoods. Beyond that, there are likely contractual things making it more difficult for her to just come out of the closet. Recording artists are independent contractors, and thus breaking off employment is very easy. There are usually morality clauses, and these clauses can be written in such a way that coming out of the closet could be considered a breach of that contract. For example, some of the clauses are written in such a way that any act that causes significant public outrage is a breach of the morality clause. And when homophobia in the US is ever present, there is always risk that coming out will cause public outrage. And it's not just herself Taylor needs to consider. If she comes out, all of her relationships are going to be reconsidered in a new light. That includes her seemingly platonic relationships with other women, but it also includes the people that she was dating and the people that those women were dating. If some or all of them were beards, were they hiding their own orientations? And if Taylor really was dating Carly while Carly was with Joshua Kushner, what does that mean about their relationship? Unfortunately, with a celebrity as large as Taylor, you're going to have fans that just pursue leads and investigate people regardless of whether they themselves want to be out. Taylor likely employs NDAs with anyone who works for her, gets super close to her, because basically every celebrity does. And often those NDAs are mutual, which would mean that Taylor herself couldn't speak about those relationships. She may choose to hide her orientation in part just because it prevents her from having to dance around NDAs she's a part of. Like, you can't tell me her and Carly wouldn't have one, and one of my theories is that Exile ending was Carly and Taylor's NDA expiring. I've heard some Gaylors suggest that Taylor may not be out to her parents, and I don't think that's likely. First off, I do think that Taylor realized she was at least bi fairly early in life before she was mega famous. Some people cite her MySpace behavior as evidence that, but as a former MySpace user, it wasn't terribly uncommon for straight girls to be kind of flirty with female friends there. The bigger evidence for that, to me, is the lyric change on Teardrops on My Guitar. It seems so weird for me to change the lyric from "You look at me" to "Drew looks at me," unless you're really concerned someone might think you're singing to a girl. Allegedly, the song is about Drew Hardwick, and when he heard the song, he asked Taylor out, and she rejected him to focus on her career, or maybe her people knew from the beginning it was about a girl and forced her to make it explicitly hetero. But returning to the topic of her parents, it does feel like she shares so much with her mom. I'd be astonished if she didn't share that. And I think that is one element of why her parents are so overprotective of her and why they're so concerned for her safety. I think knowing your kid is LGBTQ always makes parents scared for their kids' safety, especially in a world where our reputations are being smeared by the actual predators of the world, politicians. Another factor that's relevant to Taylor is the fact that a large number of her fans really connect to her by how much they relate to her music and thus feel like they relate to her. A subset of those fans are likely also closeted and queer and may be deep in denial. Having their favorite singer come out may make them have to look deeply at themselves, and if they're not ready to do that, they could be repelled. Don't get me wrong, I think Taylor coming out could be a really good aha moment for a lot of people who are only into cis heteronormativity because that's what society told them they should want. But I think there are also going to be a lot of people who aren't ready for that realization, and if you've ever participated in Gaylor TikTok or Twitter, you probably already know that there is a small but very vocal subset of Taylor's fans who attack Gaylors and threaten us with death threats and worse. I know we all want to believe that the fandom is sunshine and rainbows all the time, but nothing brings out the daggers faster than the rainbows, if you catch my drift. That said, I do think there's a trend in a different direction. A few years ago in Germany, almost 200 prominent actors, singers, and other performers staged a mass coming out, wherein they basically said, "Hey, half the industry is queer people, can we stop pretending? This is goddamn exhausting." And they were so successful that the next year, a bunch of LGBTQ people that were a part of the German Catholic Church staged a mass coming out. I definitely believe that many people within the US, especially prominent celebrities who are members of the community, are aware of this and have been inspired by this. And part of me does feel like we are going to see more people in show business who choose to live life authentically. However, I don't think we are going to see it in the form of big statements. No Vanity Fair, I am Caitlyn. I think we are going to see it more as a quieter, more gradual thing. A few people on TikTok have commented that Taylor really seems to be soft launching her orientation and getting people who have only seen her as this boy crazy girl to start seeing her in a different light. I doubt she will stay in the closet forever. I think a lot of her continued straight act is just to keep everything under her control until she owns all of her masters. I don't think she wants anything to overshadow the music, nor do I think she wants one of these re-records to flop, because the success of this is bigger than her. She is showing record companies that you can have an album come back into the charts again even after a decade, and she's showing other performers that they can have access to the rights for their music, and they should have access to the rights of their own music. Not for nothing, the pandemic made a lot of people change their priorities and realize what things were most important to them. I definitely think Taylor is putting her career success first, but I also think she knows that most female pop stars have a waning career once they hit the late 30s and early 40s. And I think once she's hit the major milestones that she wants to in the music industry, that she's going to branch out in other directions which likely would penalize her less for being openly sapphic. As someone who's lived in the closet for many a year myself, I can attest to the fact that it is positively exhausting to live a lie. And it's not just one lie, especially if you are in a beard relationship and you have to keep track of what people know, what details about which scenarios. You constantly have to think about everything you share and how you shared it and what the other people in your life share about you as well. You have the constant worry about what happens if you're outed against your will. All of that energy is energy that you could just put towards things you love, and many of us get to a point where the financial benefits of playing it straight are not worth the intense emotional cost. And that's another element to it. Often, sapphic women do not act or dress in the ways that society tries to demand of women. When we are trying to pass as straight, we have to put on an act. And I do think, especially based on some of the pictures we have seen, like with Taylor, with Lily, and based on how her more recent street styles have been embracing more sapphic trends, that she has been putting on a deliberate act in order to pass as straight. And sure, you can do it, but think about how much more you could do if you weren't doing the work of maintaining that facade. How much happier could you be if you could love in public without worrying that if you're seen with your partner, your career is over? Soft launching your orientation. For a while, Taylor has taken advantage of things like what we're seeing right now. If a man and a woman are successful and conventionally attractive, they really only have to do the bare minimum in public for people to believe they're together. Like, there was one picture where they were kind of chastely hugging, and I think another where they're holding hands. And that had some podcasters demanding an adult video. And all the while, she had Sophie Turner staying at one of her places, and I think Cara Delevingne spent the night at her place as well. Both of these women were papped leaving Taylor's apartment in the morning. And I'll be honest, I don't think Taylor is with Sophie or Cara, but when you compare how the media and the people have interpreted the Travis Kelce situation versus the fact that only Gaylors have really said something about the fact that those sleepovers with the ladies could have been so much, much more, you see how much society normalizes these hetero relationships. It normalizes these relationships so much that the people who are most homophobic are also the ones who are most likely to believe that you're just a boy-crazy straight woman just because you held hands with a man in public from time to time. I believe for a while now, Taylor has taken advantage of this blinder that people have, this desperate urge to cling to the belief that she is straight, and she has used this to conceal her sapphic relationships, even when she was seemingly very loud and public about it, like the era of the Big Sur car trip with Carly. One day, we will look at the masterful way Taylor has deflected away from her queer relationships with a series of more and more paper-thin PR relationships, and it will be a study on perception versus reality. She can literally be spending the night with queer women, but if she gets seen in the most PR shot ever with a football player, they're OTP and babies in the future. She has managed both personas masterfully, and I think that that's one of the reasons why Maddie and Travis rumors were allowed to fly, was because they are keeping her Hetlor fans happy and adding to the smokescreen of relationships designed at least in part to help conceal her sapphic leanings. I do think Taylor has absolutely tried to make a public coming out before, and I think that's something most Gaylors agree on. It looks as though in 2016 she had a big coming out planned for New York Pride that year that was canceled when the Masters were sold out from under her. And then I believe in either 2019 or 2020, there was evidence she had planned to come out as well. Because especially when you look at like the You Need to Come Down music video and the promotional stuff about the Me video release, it absolutely looks like these things were meant to be a ramp up to a coming out that was canceled at the last moment. And I believe nowadays that Taylor is trying to normalize soft launching your orientation. For a while, major publications would not breathe a word of the fact that Taylor could possibly be Sapphic, and anytime they even got close to it, it was very quickly and discreetly removed. Stuff about Carly and their best friendship gets posted, then disappears. But starting in August, the week of the LA shows and Carly's birthday, things seemed to change. Exile ended. As I stated earlier, I personally believe that Exile ended was the ending of Taylor's contractual liabilities that would prevent her from coming out. So morality clauses or things like that, or maybe NDAs with some previous women that she's been with. When that exile ended, a lot of us Gaylors noticed stuff began to change. You suddenly had a lot of major publications talking about Carly, and was she more than a friend? And Cosmo did a special on Camp Gaylor. It was as though Taylor's publicist, Tree Payne, had suddenly given people the go-ahead to discuss this. This seems like a good opportunity to mention one of the criticisms that Hetlors have levied against Gaylors, that Taylor herself has asked people to stop speculating about her relationships. First off, most of the time she said something about that, the wording specified that she didn't want the media speculating. I cannot think of a single time she has attacked fans for speculating. And I think there's an important difference because the media is trying to be sensational, trying to make money off of it, and trying to make headlines. They often don't respect her and are taking a disingenuous look at her life. Whereas her Gaylor fans love her, respect her, see tremendous talent in her, and have poured over her every lyric and so many interviews and comments from Taylor's friends. We really try to get to know what she truly believes because it seems that Taylor wants people to see her for who she actually is. Furthermore, I believe having third parties talk about the potential that Taylor may be Sapphic is part of a deliberate strategy that her and other celebrities have been using, where they allow fans in the industry to adjust to the idea that they may be queer rather than making a big PR statement where you identify yourself and make yourself an instantly huge target. I do suspect that as the vault tracks from 1989 and Rep are revealed, that it may become significantly more obvious, even to straight people, that Taylor is Sapphic, because those albums already had a lot of tracks the Gaylors believe are references to Diana Agron and Karlie Kloss. Presumably, there are more tracks that were rejected by her old label for being too obvious. And I think a part of encouraging third parties to start talking about it was when Glad and Stonewall both posted her among other LGBTQ artists who had won big at the awards. I absolutely think that if Tree Payne didn't arrange that outright, that she at minimum told those organizations that they no longer needed to keep it a secret that Taylor was Sapphic. Because as I mentioned, it's likely that at least a few of the major LGBTQ organizations knew about her coming out because from everything we have access to, we believe she was supposed to come out at New York Pride. That year, she performed at Stonewall, and I believe every other performer who performed that day was a member of the LGBTQ community, so it wasn't like Allies Day. But regardless, I think these posts are extremely important because first off, these organizations are not going to post her if she's not on board with it. We know in the past that Tree Payne has seemingly got things removed, and I have heard that she is a very stubborn, hard-nosed lady when it comes to Taylor. But this also gives credibility to the fact that she's a member of the community because those organizations are not going to post a straight woman amongst other LGBTQ winners. They are not going to risk their own reputations with members of the community unless they know. That, to me, really felt like a concrete, yes, y'all are reading into the lyrics right, she does like the ladies, and you are allowed to talk about it. It's also worth noting that speculating about a public figure's orientation isn't rude or disrespectful or invasive any more than speculating about their hetero relationships. The only reason that you'd believe that is if you believed that there was something inherently wrong with being LGBTQ. Obviously, we shouldn't speculate if someone is in a scenario where they might be hurt or imprisoned for it, but when it comes to powerful American celebrities, I don't see it as any different than speculating they might be in a hetero relationship. And I know that it does make some people uncomfortable, especially some people that were outed against their will when third parties say that someone is LGBTQ when that person hasn't explicitly said so themselves. And if Taylor hadn't shown so many signs herself, I might agree that this was inappropriate. But this isn't the matter of someone seemingly straight being labeled as Sapphic. This is a matter of someone who is flagged over and over again, both visibly in their clothes and in their imagery and their lyrics. There are many Swifties, myself included, who interpret Exile as a song in part directed at her fans. And when she sang it live that night in LA as one of the acoustic songs for the evening, it hit me especially hard. As her audience sang the lyric to her, "'Cause you never gave me a warning sign," Taylor sang the response, "I gave so many signs." There was a hint of desperation in her voice, as if she was saying, "Why, despite the myriad of attempts I've made to quietly convey to you who I actually am, are so many fans so desperate to see me as straight? So desperate, in fact, that they devote their time to threatening and harassing anyone who dares suggest otherwise. So desperate that they make it difficult for me to be myself openly because they would not accept me." Because without a doubt, I suspect her fear over fan reactions is a part of the reason why she has stayed in the closet as long as she has. If she could have faith that her fans wouldn't abandon her, she could act freely. That said, personally, I think Eras Tour is part of a greater performance art project that Taylor is putting on, which will ultimately culminate in her making some action that will officially cement her Sapphic status. I don't honestly know that she's going to come storming out of the closet, per se. I doubt we're ever going to see the PR publication that says, "It's me, hi, I'm the lesbo, it's me." Instead, I think we do see her calmly in a relationship with a woman. Taylor is constantly singing about wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard. She said numerous times how validating it is when she knows her audience has felt the feelings that she's felt. She's constantly saying to focus on the lyrics and stop thinking about the men who may be behind them. I think she's been trying to get fans to realize this and be comfortable with this for a while now. And like I said earlier, I don't think she's the only one. Soft launching your queerness basically means having fans and the PR slowly get the greater populace comfortable with the fact that you're LGBTQ, rather than making a huge coming out statement that is liable to make you the target of militant homophobic hate mobs. It's kind of what I call the Elton John method. I don't think that many people were really surprised when he came out because he had embraced a lot of the flamboyance associated with being a gay entertainer at the time. And I think because of that, and the fact that he's a guy, that he had a significantly easier time coming out than a lot of performers. Taking it personally, I want to talk about me for a moment. I was recently going through a journey of self-reflection that also involved listening to a lot of Taylor Swift music. It really started when I realized just how much of All Too Well and other songs allegedly about John and Jake really spoke my own truth in addition to Taylor's. And then I just kept finding more and more songs of hers that really seemed to speak the words that I'd struggled to find for so many years. I did a lot of emotional processing by listening to Rep and Folklore and Evermore and Lover and Midnights especially. There was this weird underlying theme that I felt tied me to the music that I couldn't figure out at the time. And I slowly realized that it was the fact that I had been manipulated by compet culture. I'd fallen for the fairy tales of men and white horses, and I'd pursued that because I thought it was the safest option for me. But after processing, I realized that I didn't even actually like men and was only pursuing them for safety and for greater success in the world. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't under the impression I was straight, I just hadn't realized that I was a lesbian. And a lot of the songs that I really listened to a lot were the songs where Taylor seemed to really start rejecting heteronormativity. No deal that 1950s shit for me. As someone who realized I was bi, realized I liked girls more, but also realized dating men was easier and safer, I've been in relationships that were beards, and I know how living one life when I'm with my friends and can be myself, and then having another life when I have to pretend that I'm a straight woman who is in love with her man. I can't imagine how she's managed to do all of that and achieve what she has. Taylor being Sapphic, as I've said, just adds such an extra layer to her already complex self, a layer that undoubtedly has forced her to work harder and suppress her true desires for the sake of her career. Why now? If Taylor has been living a double life all these years, secretly dating women and hiding it behind the men she also dated, why is she doing this now? First off, I think it's very common for late-in-life Sapphics to come to the realization that living a lie isn't giving them the perks they thought it was in their mid to late 30s. The older you get, the more important it is to use your energy for the things that are important to you, not the things that are artifice for other people. Also, as I mentioned, I don't think Taylor is done with music per se. I just think she is becoming done with the idea of being just a pop star. She really seems to want to develop herself and her talents in other directions, and those directions may be more accepting of her, especially if she's doing something like directing, where she's more behind the scenes. I do think there's potential that Taylor is currently in a long-term relationship with a woman. I started to have this suspicion when she was with Joe. Sometimes in interviews she would say Joe, and sometimes she said my partner. And sure, I understand that there are some hetero couples that use this language as well, but the way Taylor uses language very deliberately and very evasively, it seemed more likely to me that this was kind of like how her song lyrics switch from he to you, inferring two different subjects. I also think that at this point, I don't think Taylor is the one being protected. Like, to a degree, I think she wants things under wraps until she owns all her own work again, so she can ensure that the re-releases are financially successful. Because those things are bigger than her. She is proving that other artists may be able to do similar things to bring back albums in new versions and have them be more successful than ever. And I think a big part of her sees Reputation as one of her best albums, and one that didn't get its accolades because of the narrative that was going on around about her then. I'll also admit that her coming out is progressing quicker than I expected. Like everything with Carly in that week of Eras tour, when I first started this script, I thought I'd have a few months to work on it because clearly I had a lot I wanted to say about it. But between Carly's birthday week and her being posted on LGBTQ advocacy Instagram accounts, there seems to be a rapid push to normalize Taylor's queerness. And if it isn't because of a long-term lover, I think it may be that she wants to explore more explicitly queer themes in her art. And if she is making a narrative film, as I believe she is, she likely is including characters who are not straight and wants to make it clear that she herself is a member of the community. My predictions. Several people, myself included, have predicted that Taylor is probably going to make a music label. Personally, I'm surprised that wasn't the direction she went in after the Scooter Braun disaster, but she's been mentioning in interviews since that era that she's been thinking about making her own label. And now, in the best financial position of her life and at the top of her career, it would be a good time to do that. With how devoted she is to artists owning their own work, it would be extremely likely that she would not only make a label, but also a label that was extremely generous to the artists it signs. I think she could also be making an artist management company, basically what Scooter Braun did for people like Justin and Carly. I think she could be really good at it, but I also think it would be a jewel in her crown to be better at Scooter's job than Scooter himself. Taylor's also jumped into film with 2 feet, joining the Academy, directing some of her own videos, and reportedly she has a film script that she's been working on. I think this is the next natural direction in her creation. I think it's a great medium for her, and that we will at minimum see her direct or write a film. I do think long term that she will open her own film studio. We have not seen a fraction of what Taylor is capable of. My Gaylor status. Because I intend to use this video as a foundational piece in my Sapphic analysis of Taylor, I want to include what my thoughts are about Taylor's alleged relationships with women. Because I do think that depending on which Sapphic relations you think are real, can also impact how you interpret some songs. I want to state that this is just my current interpretation of lyrics and other evidence, and that my mind has changed in the past and likely will change in the future as I'm exposed to additional evidence. I am not attached to my vision of what I believed happened as some biblical truth, to be clear, and I don't think we will ever know for sure until Taylor makes a memoir. I'm basically 100% sure that Liz, Diana, Carly, and Willie were all more than friends with Taylor. I do realize with Sapphic women that often we have friendships with deeper than friendship emotional connections before we realize we're Sapphic and actually intentionally cultivate that connection and start having sexual relationships. So it wouldn't surprise me if Liz and Diana and some of her earlier partners were just Sapphic friendships. There is definitely a point where her lyrics made it clearer that she had been with women, though. Like, after Dress and False God, you will not convince me that she hadn't realized that she was Sapphic and acted upon it. I also think it's very likely that as the hottest young Sapphic in showbiz, that Taylor likely has had some short flings. Taylor has admitted to being in love with love. I agree that it is likely that she and Diana were split up against their will because one or both of their management teams wanted to protect their image as straight women. And it does feel like later songs she wrote that were Diana-coded infer that there were still some feelings there. But likewise, I'm not a late-stage Swift-Run. I don't think Diana and Taylor have continued to secretly date all of these years. I also don't think Carly was her last woman. I just think it's very likely after Kissgate that Taylor hunkered down and became much, much more private to prevent herself and her partners from being outed. I know the least about Tilly. That's the ship name for Taylor and Lily Donaldson, and I know that that's a pairing that a lot of people know the least about, but Tilly Nation has made some really compelling points. I don't believe absolutely everything they say, but a lot of it is compelling, and I have never believed that Carly has continued in the background until today, or that Carly was the only woman for Taylor and she's been heartbroken ever since. I think it's time to go asserts that Taylor recognized when it was over with her. I don't necessarily believe all of her relationship with men's were strictly beards, though. Looking back at historical showbiz relationships, polyamory occurred with a fair frequency, but I'd say it's definitely looked down upon by a lot of people even today, as most people have only experienced poly through sister wives and the creepy 40-year-old couple at the goth club who invited you to Unicorn that one time. I think it's very likely that even if people like Joe started out as beards, having a shared secret can bring two people together, and being locked in together during lockdown adds additional nuance to their situation. Taylor wouldn't be the first or last to fall for her beard, and I have to point out that even a beard isn't usually just a beard. A beard is usually a very trusted friend and confidant with whom you can trust your biggest secret and know they'll keep it. Even if Joe was just a beard, he is still very relevant to the overall narrative of Taylor's story and work, and I'm not in a rush to throw him away as some Gaylors are. And to pivot to my thoughts on Carly and Josh, rich people often do not have the same views on monogamy, like I said earlier. The Kushners wouldn't be the first or last rich couple where the husband allowed the wife to have relationships with women so he didn't have to deal with her emotions and stuff so much. I don't know that either of those circumstances is for certain, but I do know they're plausible enough that I don't just dismiss the male partners in this equation just because I accept the female ones. But much like I think some of her relationships had overlap, I also think it's a fallacy to assume that all of her songs are only about one person each. I think many of her songs are likely about multiple different people, just with subtle focus and subject shifts. As I stated at the beginning of this segment, I realize we likely will never get to know the truth of Taylor's relationships, so I don't ever get attached to anything and think that it is canonical truth. And I do hope that we get the memoir someday, just so she can regale us with her full story in her own words. Until then, though, it's fun to speculate. And what matters more, knowing the truth or having a good story? I suppose that depends on who you ask. If you watched thus far, thank you very much for sticking with me through what's inevitably going to be my longest video yet. If you like this content, I have a series called Sapphic Saturdays, where I'm going through Taylor's songs one letter at a time and giving them a Sapphic interpretation. If that interests you, make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you know when those episodes are going to release. I've been doing them every other Saturday at 9 p.m., but I'm going to try to get them up to every Saturday. Very curious everybody's thoughts in the comments below. Please try to keep it respectful. I'm going to delete anything that is homophobic or rude or aggressive or anything like that. Keep it simple, keep it sweet. And let me know if you have any songs that you want to hear me talk about on Sapphic Saturdays.